Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first critical conversation of the academic year. Thank you all for logging on today to participate and get an update on the master plan. I just want to go over our rules for today. Chat will be disabled during the presentation, so please have a piece of paper handy, jot down any questions or thoughts you have. And once the presentation is over, I will open the chat for you. And at that point, you can also, raise your hand and ask a question yourself. We are recording this session, so just be aware. And I think that's pretty much it. So, Phil, some folks are still filtering in. So maybe wait another 30 seconds and then you can take it away.
Okay. We'll let people join us. We'll say good afternoon to our first round of folks that are joining us. Thank you for your patience. We've got close to 200 folks that will be joining us today, so we're trying to make sure that they can all get in. And I see now they're dribs and drabs, Beth. They're coming one at a time, it appears. So why don't we get started? And thank you all very much for taking some time again out of your busy schedules to be part of the Critical Conversation series. It's great to see you all. I hope you've had a great start to your semester. It has been an extraordinarily busy start to the semester for all of us for a number of reasons. And one of those reasons is certainly what we're here to talk about today, which is the Middlesex Community College Master Plan. First, really want to thank Chairman Campbell, who's the chair of our board, who's joining us today and often joins us for these conversations. And I don't think we have any other board members, but Chairman Campbell, thank you for all your support and all that you do. And I do want to extend my thanks to our partners at Sasaki, who will be doing this presentation today, and our partners at DCAM. And we are very grateful for all of their assistance. We have been, as you know, not only doing a master planning process, but a combined process with decarbonization, which will not necessarily be the focus of this presentation today, but you will see some of that process alluded to in terms of the state regulations that we are following as we move through this process. And I'm proud to say one of the first community colleges going through that decarbonization process. And we're learning a lot through that process. So I'm very grateful that we were selected to participate early in this as we worked on a master plan. Just to catch all of you up, all of you know that we had during the COVID pandemic the need to move everything that we did here at the college, student services, all of our accounts work, and certainly all of our classes to off the campuses physically and into the virtual world, and did that with tremendous success thanks to the partnership between our MCCC, our professional staff, our faculty, and all of you that are on this Zoom today. Coming out of the pandemic, the world looks rather different from an enrollment structure point of view, and it felt really important at that time that we develop a plan for a master planning process that would take us into the years to come to talk about Middlesex's future. And that was critically important. A lot of the data that we've had that's been developed, that Sasaki has had access to, is some of the significant data as we were bringing many courses and individuals back on campus. So you will see embedded in this plan some reference to the fact that a lot of our face-to-face classes are part of the data and the study that they did when we initially came back on campus. And we've developed a lot that has changed during that time. So two things that I really want to remind everyone is this is the same presentation that the Board of Trustees saw in June. They were the first to see it with a number of recommendations and a validation for our charting our course forward, which will be part of today's plan. There will be a lot of information that is in this master plan, and you will have access to it. This is a draft. We are still very much in the planning process, and that process will end sometime around November. Although I will tell you that we have actively pursued a number of opportunities to move forward on some of these fronts. And so I'm excited to tell you that not all of the information that you see today is the same, and we can certainly in our discussion afterwards talk about some of the changes. One pure example is that the academic deans and the department chairs and faculty have made a concerted effort to balance out sort of what is going on in terms of face-to-face classes, both on our Lowell and Bedford campus. And so those numbers have changed dramatically, and we certainly see that this fall, along with all the work that we've seen about Mass Reconnect. I want to remind everyone that this is a plan that will need implementation. And so while I wanted to make sure I keep you abreast of the planning process all the way through in the developments, that we will be developing an actual execution for this plan starting in the spring semester. Once the plan is completed in November and we share that with the Board of Trustees and we share it with all of you, we'll be asking for volunteers to be part of the conversation that helps drive the implementation of this plan. So if you're interested in some of what you see today, whether it be some of the sustainability pieces from decarbonization, or if you're interested in some of the moves that we're going to be making, we very much want to hear from you and have you involved in that implementation plan. So we'll be asking you to think, would you be willing to give some time to an implementation task force that we will be developing in the spring? The second thing I want to remind you is this is not the college's first master plan. This master plan was done 15 years ago by the same partner, Sasaki, with assistance from the Department of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance. And I want to remind you that these are recommendations and they are still in process. So you are not seeing a complete plan. You are seeing the evolution of the plan as we've worked through the last 18 months. And I think what I would say is, you will now also see the beginnings of a more formulated and detailed plan that will be available in November. But our job today is to sort of take in the information from our presenters in Sasaki along with their data and ideas, and then for us to have a conversation afterwards and to hear your reaction to some of those ideas and concepts. So we look forward to that conversation. The presentation will take probably about an hour in order to go through the comprehensive work that's been done by Sasaki and also our partners in DCAM. And I think I also want to mention to you that, just as Beth has said, jot down your ideas, jot down your thoughts, and then we'll circle back and take all of those questions before we leave today. At this point, I'll turn it over to Vice President Cook, who will introduce our guests who will be doing the presentation this afternoon.
Great. Thank you, Phil. Also, at the same time we're going to be doing this, I think Beth and Caitlin are going to share an email link on the chat, which we've used previously, that we want to remind everybody is where we are also accepting submissions or ideas from you in terms of your feedback. That's mccmasterplan@middlesex.mass.edu, but it will be in the chat over to the right in a bit as we go here. So as Phil said, we've partnered now with Sasaki and DCAM on this project. And we have been having weekly meetings with these folks now for 10 plus months, heading into the home stretch here of the final versions of this. So there's been quite a bit going on. I know a number of you have been pulled into some of the offshoot conversations for the fact finding. There's been a lot of questions been coming our way to collect information from really about 15 to 20 years worth of historical data for the college, and I appreciate everybody that's helped on that front for the data collection. And we feel as though we are definitely in the fourth quarter, if you will, of this long process. But like Phil said, we're also going to be launching now into the next wave for the implementation. So yes, please, we will be looking for your input. I also want to flag that I know a number of you have some large-scale projects that have been happening during the course of the summer, whether it's over on Middle Street, some of the work that was done over in the labs there, the culinary work here in the Cowan Center, the kiln over in the Federal Building. And because of those projects and some of the work that the facilities teams on both campuses have been doing to address some of these time-sensitive needs for the master plan, I know there a number of you have a lot of one-off requests that facilities is trying to meet them, but it's trying to get some of these other programs ready for the starts of the semester, which they were able to successfully do. So thank you to facilities groups for that. But what I want to do is turn it over to our partners who are going to do this presentation, so they can show you where they are with, with the plan at this point, with an understanding that probably before Thanksgiving we're looking, it's some type of a final project. I also want to give it a shout out. I know I saw you on here, Lisa LaBelle, and the folks on the Sustainability Committee, because as Phil referenced, we are one of the first in the state to get out in front of this decarbonization studies that are being done for higher education. It seemed exciting at the time, but we quickly realized that as being the beta site for it, there was a lot of unanswered questions that were needed by the engineers, not even so much us on the data collection. So the folks from DCAM have offered to meet with FSA's Sustainability Committee at one of their upcoming meetings to kind of spitball with some of these ideas. That the decarbonization study is a little bit, maybe a month or so behind the master plan. So the product from that isn't going to be coming out until the beginning of 24. So the work that FSA group can provide, I've told Lisa, for folks not to be shy. This is the point at which we would basically strongly urge them to provide any input they have for some of these efforts that they're going to see detailed today, and maybe some food for thought they've got in the coming weeks that we can circle back around with DCAM with. So with that, I do want to, and I've lost on the screen here, but I know Marianne Ocampo from Sasaki is here with us. I know Sadeshna is here. I think Serena's on as well. We usually have Ellen Whitmore and Elaine Campos from DCAM, as well as Sarah Creighton. And if you guys are in the back screens, I apologize for not seeing you. But Beth, if we can turn over control to Marianne Ocampo from Sasaki, she'll steer us through the presentation portion.
Yep, Mary should be all set.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you here today, to be part of Critical Conversation kind of series, and to really share some of the ideas for the campus master plan for Middlesex Community College. Very excited to get your thoughts and insights and questions. As we go through this material, we'll have time towards the end to really have that discussion. But I believe hopefully everyone can see the cover slide that we have. Okay, great. Well, again, I'm going to spend probably the next hour, maybe a little less, going through the presentation. I have my team members, Sudeshna and Serena, here with me that can chime in, but ultimately we'll go through this journey together in about 40 slides in about 50 minutes, and then have the rest of the time really for that conversation. So first and foremost, as we think about Middlesex Community College, we are aspiring to the 7 principles that you see outlined here in a way that guides future campus planning decisions and investment. And as we go through these 7 principles, these are part of the DNA of what we're doing when thinking about all the different physical, environmental kind of aspects of our planning work. First is to establish unique campus identities, knowing that you have Bedford campus and Lowell campus, and they have completely different contexts and conditions. And so how do you start to really understand those contexts and what's conducive to them, and knowing programmatically the academic units that are affiliated and those who go to each campus. Second, amplifying innovation and hybrid learning. In a post-pandemic or continuing pandemic perspective, I think what we've learned from understanding access to education, and then knowing how technology plays a role in this, and that there's in-person and there's online and there's in between. And so how can we think about those hybrid learning experiences and making sure that the technology is integrated into the pedagogies of how those are supported with the physical environment. Third, we want to decarbonize campus systems as we're thinking about decarbonization, as was mentioned earlier, which is trailing behind but integrated into this campus planning process. What are the systems that we need to really rethink and reimagine, and how do those make impact in the way that we're planning and thinking about space and infrastructure? Fourth, we want to create an inclusive public realm, and that inclusion is thinking about individuals with disabilities and understanding better access. It's the services and the types of spaces that we need in regards to different identity groups, how all of those are actually working together when we think about the public realm. Fifth, we want to understand an extension of that is strengthening the kind of affinity groups in the services and the spaces for those different identity groups. So knowing that there's a lot of great programming that's already taking place, cultural events, kind of group discussions, career preparedness, all of those aspects we want to build into the way that we're thinking about the network of spaces that are needed. Six, developing a healthy campus is balancing then the kind of mind, body, spirit aspects of well-being, as we understand that there are different campus community members, staff, faculty, and students, and what are their needs relative to how we think about a healthy experience being on campus. And then seventh, really thinking about expanding community outreach and partnerships. Who are the partners that exist? How can we strengthen those? What are the community outreach kind of aspects that can be further part of this planning effort? So those are our 7 campus planning principles that are really driving forward the future planning. And so one part of this, of course, as was mentioned with the decarbonization study, is understanding that this plan is really in part sparked by the state of Massachusetts' commitment to decarbonize. This means really that the state is working to reduce Scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions by 50% in 2030 and 97% in 2050. So Scope 1 emissions include the fossil fuels that many of our buildings rely on, and we're trying to move away from those fossil fuels to more efficient electric HVAC systems. The decarbonization goals for MCC will be fluidly integrated and have been into the master plan, but as we continue finalizing and creating a preferred plan, will be part of the way that we're thinking about phasing and what the action items are. So as was mentioned, there will be future meetings to discuss this with folks who really want to talk about decarbonization and sustainability. Now, part of this is understanding how zero greenhouse gas emissions really are realized. And so first, we really want to focus on energy conservation measures that ensure that we're reducing the demand for energy. Second, we want to focus on efficient fossil fuel-free systems, buildings, really, or district scale electric systems. And then lastly, we want to consider renewable energy and the source of an energy supply within our strategy. So shifting then to the concept alternatives and the ways that we're thinking about the future campuses, I should say, we had 3 different concepts that we were exploring, and these 3 concepts really showed a range of ideas just to provoke different kind of mindsets towards what the campuses could be. First was looking at a balanced campus of taking what you have as far as the kind of amount of offerings and the unique identities of each campus and just continuing to reinforce and balance those. Second was looking at the Bedford campus and thinking about it and reimagining it as a life sciences campus. And then the third option was understanding, like, well, is there a way that you would actually consolidate all of your academic units and MCC within the Lowell campus? What would that do in regards to how we think about where investment takes place and where access to these, the campus is and so forth. So with that, though, with a lot of kind of conversation and discussions with campus leadership, we created consensus with a solution right now that we're looking at that took some inspiration from all 3 of the concepts and blending those together. Ultimately, the plan maintains both campuses, reinforcing 2 campus identities and really being mindful of opportunities to support programming and decarbonization goals together for both campuses. And so you can kind of see what that is here, and we're going to talk more in depth about each of those campuses. First and foremost, if we start to think about the Bedford campus, we know that the Bedford campus is really nicely positioned to attract lab and tech related industry training and education. There's a lot going on with proximity to Route 3. We can see the tech park, but there are ways that we can start to leverage this in regards to the economy and what's surrounding the Bedford campus and part of the kind of economy of the region. Part of this is understanding that there are many companies within a short distance to both campuses, but Bedford in particular has a lot of things happening around it. And so you can see some stats here in regards to the amount of biotech industries, more than 430, the amount of jobs that are generated or created in regards to this industry. And then also thinking about wages generated by the biopharma kind of industry. All of these are part of this kind of regional quick kind of look at what's occurring. So as we look at the Bedford campus, you can kind of get situated in this plan that we're seeing with North Academic at the top of your page, the library really at the bottom of your page, and then just understanding the kind of tight campus core that you have surrounded by surface parking and of course this beautiful natural setting. In regards to this, there's a lot to be said in regards to how you're utilizing your buildings. And the current Bedford campus isn't fully utilized due to enrollment as well as shifts to hybrid learning that are occurring. So if we look at the existing utilization by building, you can really see that. All buildings are underutilized. No building really achieves target utilization regardless of their program. For example, in Henderson Hall, only half of the instructional spaces are hitting 25% of their target utilization rate. And this usually is the hours that students are learning in the classroom or in the lab. So you can see these numbers as far as the rate of utilization. If they're higher utilization and there's more people using those spaces, they would be the darker color, which we don't have anything here that we're seeing that is of that. But even Henderson Hall, for example, has 4 instructional spaces, of which are more than 50%, but we have 7 and 11 that are less than 50%. So that gives us a sense of, how the Bedford campus buildings are being utilized based off our data. If we also start to think about that, it plays a role in how we think about the strategies for how we're going to reposition or reimagine some of these existing structures. And so for us, we're thinking about ways to propose these learning zones that you see here in this bubble diagram. We've explored reimagining and amplifying programs in the Bedford campus that focus on active learning, life sciences, and creative programs to create more cohesive learning zones around the quad. We also see the Bedford campus as an opportunity to focus on non-credit learning with programs of community outreach and vocational training. Most of these programs currently only exist in Bedford. And we also think the kind of natural, peaceful setting of the Bedford campus is valuable to learning in of itself. How can we best utilize outdoor learning spaces through elevating the space of the quad and other kinds of pockets of open space as part of the kind of learning landscape? And so we can imagine starting to pull out ways that we're planting native kind of gardens, having outdoor classrooms and recreational courts and so forth, but knowing that it's climate conducive and that we are in New England, how can we create appropriate outdoor spaces? And so as part of our proposed building program for the Bedford campus, what you can see here is a lot of ways that we're kind of translating those different learning zones into programmatic spaces. And if we start to kind of think through that, the first is really understanding Henderson Hall as a life sciences learning hub, including nursing and radiology. Academic resources would become creative kind of program hub that has arts and graphic design studios. North Academic would continue to focus on general education. That would be music and math, the concert hall. Cataldo Building, an enrollment center reimagined as a flexible kind of hybrid workspaces with open workstations, hoteling, and more meeting spaces. The enrollment center will also become the center for adult education and community outreach. And in this case, the library would also be reimagined as a learning commons with better student meeting spaces. Now, part of this is also, thinking about what buildings might remain or what may actually go offline, which we'll be talking about a little bit later on. But it's also being mindful of all the different kinds of space migrations that occur and how to think about phasing in a way where there are smooth transitions and ways that we're redesigning the interiors of the buildings to be conducive to these new types of programs. So you see in this very complex matrix, the kind of way that we've been rigorously kind of going through and beginning to map out what's being located where and looking at a timeline where that would actually work well for the college. So if we start to think about it from that kind of larger point of view of the proposed building uses and academic programs and where things are located, we believe that Henderson Hall has great opportunity to being transformed as a kind of life sciences hub. You all have seen Henderson Hall, I'm sure, so all these photographs are really familiar as to what those spaces look like. We also have the kind of floor plans that break down the configuration of the different types of spaces from the ground floor, first floor, and second floor. So taking a look at those, we are looking at ways where we can reimagine this life sciences hub so that the big idea for the ground floor is really thinking about a brand new open lab. This is a new kind of 4,000 square feet of lab space that could have robotics, life sciences uses, maker spaces. But what's really nice too is that you have faculty offices that are in close proximity to this open lab, and that faculty are there accessible and visible really on the ground floor. And so rethinking this really active ground floor in regards to Henderson Hall, as we start to migrate up the building, we can start to see on the first floor then really that second level ways that we're really thinking through the lab spaces. And so in this case, we have 2 new 30-seat labs. We have flex space for studying, small meeting rooms that can be knitted in to the way that we see this corridor extending into ways that open up into areas where people are creatively colliding as they run into each other or intersect, and making that all about ways people are learning, studying, socializing, and having those spaces that they can occupy within the building. And then as we go to the upper floor, what we've been doing is integrating and incorporating all the great ongoing work that has already been part of this floor in our planning effort. So looking at the 6 new 24-seat labs, it has been part of that. And again, maintaining that there's some kind of flexible spaces that run up and down the building for people to occupy on every floor. So what you can see here then is that as we look at all the floor plans, you can kind of see each one of the kind of assortment of different types of instructional spaces that we have listed here. Henderson Hall meets 100% of the open lab demand. We also know that 100% of the STEM lab demand is met, and 60% of the total classroom demand is met. In addition, we have a lot of faculty office space here, as well as flex study space that we've been talking about that would be met within Henderson Hall. So as far as proposed campus land use, we can start to understand, what are the buildings and structures that are really not working in regards to utilization. We know that Henderson Hall is an amazing opportunity for the school. We know that labs are more energy intensive than other types of academic buildings. And we know that from a building utilization rates and the condition of some of these buildings on campus, that there are better ways to reposition some of the programming and renovation resources. So in this case, we are recommending the campus explore demolition of Bedford House, of the trustees' house, and South Academic in order to properly design for the programs that used to exist in these buildings and having those really in more modern and efficient buildings. Now, this also plays into ways that we're really thinking about decarbonization. The demolition of those three underutilized and poorly performing buildings can jumpstart decarbonization goals for the campus. These three buildings really represent 6% of emissions reduction. And so they go hand in hand in regards to how we're thinking about where you invest and where you let go of certain structures. This also extends into ways that we can think about, well, what replaces those structures? And we think that there's a way that you can activate the quad by really thinking about sustainable landscapes that can serve for academic functions as well as social use, health and well-being. And so within those spaces, we're, as we've also heard from different folks around campus, there's not a lot to do between classes. And so are there ways that we can think about the functions of outdoor spaces, places to relax, to study, to actively recreate, and actually design those as part of the way that we think about the exterior campus in regards to especially these two sites. And so also with this in mind, we want to think about improving wayfinding, adding educational components of how you can learn about what grows there, what lives there as far as the ecologies that exist, and what little critters, flora and fauna are part of this unique campus setting. So as we're thinking through the kind of long-term land use and zooming out from the core, we've identified there is potential for the college to explore alternative uses for parking lot G and the VA lot, the veterans lot that can support the college goals and decarbonization goals. And so I think that there's ways that we've identified those areas potentially to be explored for alternative uses. We know that if those are a different use in the future, that we really have to understand how parking demand and management works holistically throughout the campus to make up for any losses that may take place if those become new uses. So a more detailed kind of parking strategy would be necessary in an effort to maintain the capacity needed for the demand on the Bedford campus. So shifting now from Bedford to Lowell, we think there are a lot of opportunities in Lowell. I think that what you'll note here is that 70% of current Middlesex Community College programs are here, and that interestingly, there are 21% of enrolled students that originate from the city of Lowell that are downtown within that campus. And so as we're looking at Lowell, we're also thinking about the analysis that we've done in regards to the utilization here. As in Bedford, in Lowell, no building achieves target utilization. However, in Lowell, we have a lot more buildings and that really come closer to those targets. So if we look at Cowan Center, you can see that there are at least 9 instructional spaces that are at 76 to 100% utilization. And then we have in the darker orange here, there are at least 10 that really are above 50%, which is great. So a very well utilized building for the most part with those 19 kind of instructional spaces. All buildings have capacity for more instructional programs, And so that's what we're thinking about as we move forward. Now, another part of this is looking at the kind of ideas of what is the future of work? How are we working in regards to hybrid learning, hybrid working, and what does that mean for Cowan, for example? So we know that some of the spaces in Cowan have already been configured or reconfigured for a more high flex environment, and we'll continue to see more of that in the future. How can we design office and workspaces so they feel comfortable and they're flexible? And there's technology that's completely integrated into it as we see it in jobs everywhere, working environments, but how is that part of an extension on campus? So what we're looking at in regards to that, opportunities at Cowan here show that, this has the capacity and it already has been serving as a hub for academic and student life. How can we really think about enhancing that experience while connecting with the larger kind of community downtown through the ways that we're thinking about the outdoor spaces, the public realm, the streetscape, as well as the plazas and the active kind of ground floors, because those are what you see. Those are potentially easier access and more visibility. So for us, we're looking at some key moves. One is really thinking through the kind of right sizing of classrooms for more efficient use of academic space. So here, consolidating on floors 1 and 2, relocating IT offices from the 4th floor, consider relocation of the server room, reimagining and reconfiguring space on the 4th and 5th floors as new office environments or the future of work kind of environments. 1 floor of Cowan could also accommodate the total office demand from Bedford. So if we reshuffle and think about this, what you can see is this section below that starts to say like, okay, well, let's rezone the building and program it relative to the section where we have this core that people are moving up and down and where services, restrooms, and so forth are a very active ground plane with views to the water and a rethought public realm. But really, as you rise, things are changing programmatically. But there's a clear logic to where we're placing folks in the types of uses that exist. So as we look at this, we are also not only thinking vertically, but of course thinking horizontally and understanding ways that we're thinking about those ground floor uses. So some questions that we ask ourselves are how might we better activate the federal building lobby, the cafeteria or the lower caf at Cowan? How do we better activate them? And we think there are ways that you can reconfigure the space or interior design opportunities that would help do so. We also, when looking at these, you can kind of see what those are, which I know everyone's familiar with, but are there ways that are wayfinding signage and the types of furniture or the ways that those spaces engage with the public realm can also be reworked for better experiences? All those can play into it as we think about this. When we think about the landscape opportunities, the Lowell campus, of course, differs from Bedford in that the space between buildings isn't owned by the college, it's owned by the city. And so there's ways in which we need to really think about the partnerships that are happening with ownership of certain land that is city owned or even looking at the canals and just understanding what you can do. But one of these is looking at incorporating the Lower Locks Park kind of work that's happening with the city of Lowell as we're thinking about Middlesex Community College. And part of that is understanding the entryways. How do we create more accessible entries in regards to providing individuals with disabilities to travel and traverse particular materials during the winter and rise up to that ground floor? How do we think about safety, outdoor study spaces, outside kind of spillover event spaces because of the beautiful views and the unique kind of setting. And then, of course, thinking about stormwater infrastructure. What is the green infrastructure that is embedded within the kind of public realm where you're learning from it, but it's also performing in a very particular way? If we think about Derby Park, we can also understand then how we think about this Middle Street Park area and this beautiful mural. How can it be designed in a way that it improves accessibility? Again, we think about safety. We understand it as an outdoor study space where people may congregate, a peaceful area, green stormwater infrastructure again, that's built into this very unique little open space within the kind of urban campus fabric. And then if we're thinking about campus wayfinding, throughout the campus, we know there are opportunities really to improve wayfinding. We want to know, like, how do you know you're at Middlesex Community College? It's part of a city, but how do you know you've arrived? There's ways that the tunnel from Cowan towards Middle Street, functions. Are there drop-off zones and streetscape entrances that are clear and welcoming that we can start to really design? We can look through the kind of wayfinding and signage, lighting, especially within the history of Lowell and how that's represented. How does that complement or contrast it? Working with the kind of smaller scale integrated urban campus, and then making a unique kind of identity and character in regards to how art, for example, and lighting and so forth could be little clues of where you are relative to the campus. So in sum, I think that we are really going to be continuing to refine the plan into our draft master plan. A lot of that work is continuing to strategize on the decarbonization plan. We'll have updates really towards the end of October or into November, which will be great. And I think that's it from our part. Really interested in getting your thoughts and insights and questions.
Thank you, Marianne. Beth, if we want to just go over how we will communicate with folks through our discussion period, that would be great. I just want to remind folks that what you've seen is some exciting and bold concepts. You might find that in that there may be some inaccuracies that you want to point out because things have been evolving and changing, and we can talk more about that. And the other piece that I'd mention is everyone needs to understand that through this process, these are a series of recommendations, that in some cases, some things are possible and can happen, and in other cases, things are not necessarily possible and can't happen. But I think the concept behind what you're seeing is some significant changes, and in essence, that's what we've talked about in terms of making sure that we have the proper space utilization on both of our campuses. So Beth, if you just want to go through how we'll take this on, and then we'll start to take people's comments and questions.
Sure thing. So if you'd like to make a comment or you have a suggestion, please, we encourage that you actually turn on your mic and ask it directly. All you have to do is raise your little emoji hand. Otherwise, you can put the question into chat and I will read them out as they appear.
Thanks, Beth. Quietest I've ever seen anyone. Lisa.
Hi there.
Great to see you. How are you?
Good to see you. That looks very exciting. Just one comment, and I think this was brought up last time, is how does the community garden fit into this plan? Because we already have that lovely outside space, so I think we shouldn't forget about that. And then I just had I know it's kind of nitty-gritty detail, but with the trustee's house that already has the ground source heat pump, if that is sort of decommissioned, can that ground source heat pump be utilized for another building?
That's two great questions. I mean, first, let's hit the community garden piece, which has become so central to a lot of what happens on the Bedford campus. In fact, we've been talking about more permanent signage that identifies that as our community garden that looks like the other signs. There is no intention to take any of that space. You won't see it as a change on any of the maps because it's become such an integral part of the work that's been done both through the Sustainability Club and and I could see the possibility for expansion. So I wouldn't be overly concerned to any particular change there. And I think Sasaki has really pointed out to us how we could activate some outside learning spaces in the quad, which means that we wouldn't be looking to take that space away. So those things are not central to the quad, do not necessarily mean that there would be any significant change. As for now, the very technical question, Lisa, and I'm not sure that whether Marianne or Sadeshna or anyone else can answer the question about the reuse of the pump that was designed for the trustee's house. I don't know, Marianne or Sadeshna, does anybody have an answer to that question? I mean, it's a great question about that technology when it was implemented has advanced quite a bit since the time that it was installed. So whether or not it still has utility for a long-range energy plan, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can take the decarb question.
Thanks, Serena.
We are exploring, and hopefully in the next round later in the month, you'll be able to see, but we are exploring the sort of expansion of geothermal as one of the decarb options for like a district scale in Bedford.
Right. And so what Serena means about district scale is the idea that we might be able to use that particular function for increased efficiency and build it out as part of a system through all of the buildings that exist within the quad, or many of them. So that's part of what's on the table, Lisa.
And Phil, if I could just clarify, because I explained this with the sustainability group last week, that the decarbonization study that's being done by AEI, the engineers, is running parallel to this master plan. They're just a couple of months off in terms of their findings, but I can guarantee you, having seen where they are, because they also meet weekly or bi-weekly, that they are looking at the geothermal options for every one of the buildings. As well as I told Lisa and folks, the solar options, solar arrays were something that was being considered. So there is a far deeper technical dive that's happening on the energy decarb side that folks will get a preview of at the next sustainability meeting, which I don't know, Lisa, if that's open to the general public to attend or not, but there will be more information on that side of the conversation coming over the course of the fall here.
Thank you. We do have a question in the chat. Has the idea of solar panels on Bedford or Lowell buildings been considered?
You will get more of the explanation of the decarbonization, and absolutely. What we will have is a tool that identifies for us, building by building, what are the most appropriate, based on the structure of that building, what are the most appropriate solutions to energy efficiency, and solar is absolutely in that mix.
And one other thing to add to that, Beth, is that is, we have mentioned that in every single conversation we've had about this, but what folks also need to understand is that other than potential for some meadow or parking lot or the field usage there, to put solar arrays on a roof has another entire layer of complications, because the majority of the roofs, especially the modular buildings in Bedford, are in need of a significant infrastructure support, and they certainly cannot currently sustain what we'd be looking at for solar on those roofs. Not to mention, even upstairs here on Cowan, where we are in the downtown, poses its own problems. So I can guarantee you that they are looking at every option for every one of the buildings, all 18 buildings, and that what they're coming back with is the best choices for each of those sites.
And I will just add that kind of solar is definitely a component of the plan, but we sort of have bigger fish to fry in terms of decarbonizing the whole campus, and that's where some of the exploration into the geothermal and transitioning to electric HVAC systems, that is what is really going to push the needle for decarbonization. And this is like an incredible opportunity that, you know, I'm really thrilled that that we have at this point to move forward. It's sort of it's a big deal, the state's decarbonization goals. So we're excited to be exploring this with you.
Thank you, Serena. Jackie, you have your hand up.
Yes. By means of full disclosure, I will mention that I work in the enrollment center in Bedford. So let me preface with that. And I just wanted to try to understand. So you'd mentioned that could be shared office space and hoteling. One, I'm not sure I understand what hoteling is, but just a conceptual question there. But then a larger question of, typically we have most of our services, student services, available on both campuses. I'm also hearing that it's possible that all office space could be fit into the Cowan building. So I'm wondering, are we thinking that we're going to keep services on both campuses, or most services on both campuses? And then also in terms of shared office space, is that contingent on remote work? Because if we weren't doing remote work, we probably wouldn't be sharing offices, I assume. So I just wanted to kind of throw out all of that, just in the interest of trying to figure out what the bigger picture is in terms of staffing and so on.
Marianne, I don't know if anyone wants to take on, I mean, the idea around these are, when you look at the slide about proposed building programs, Jackie, it's about focus. It does not necessarily mean that other things won't be in that building. So it's not as if services will go away. They just might be presented in a slightly different manner, and it might be a collaborative effort, sort of like the One Stop that we created there may have a different vision of how we're using the space. And that, of course, will be part of a discussion about remote learning. I mean, hoteling is really, I mean, there's talked about shared office space, which we've always talked about. In fact, faculty have been doing that for years. And there's also this idea that not everyone, on the days that they actually come onto campus, if they are working remotely, will need their own space for 5 days a week, as you imagine. So shared office space and hoteling. Plus, we have people that move back and forth between the two campuses, so that services may be able to be provided in a more hoteling fashion. Again, requires a much deeper dive. And what I would tell you is also that within a few weeks, you're going to see a survey that's going to go out to people who are currently doing remote work, and for those who are managing remote work, because we've asked Sasaki to also give us some insight as to what we're currently doing with our remote work policy and how we might be able to advance that, change that, in order to best suit some of the challenges that we're going to have in terms of space. So there's no assumption that if you don't see it listed on the swirl of buildings, that's really about the focus in that building. That does not necessarily mean that something that is essential to the campus and essential to services would leave that building or leave the campus. So your assumption about the fact that all services would go to Lowell is not correct. There would still be student services that will be central to the part of the operation on the Bedford campus.
Thank you, Phil. Sally, your hand is raised.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Sally Quast. I'm a chemistry instructor in Lowell, and I'm part of the science faculty. And I'm sort of new to the conversation. Maybe I've missed meetings. I'm not sure about that. But there are three things that showed up for me that I wrote down while I was listening. The first one is, how is it being paid for? Like, who's paying for it? This whole thing. The second is, are we assuming that the enrollment of students being on campus is going to increase? Are we doing this expecting that somehow we're going to get them to come back to campus when many of them are happy doing hybrid or doing online courses? So I'm a little concerned that we think there'll be this onslaught of students showing up on campus that I'm not so sure will happen. Okay, and then my third concern had to do with students who have travel, and I just think it was in Lowell we have transfer students, let's say for UMass Lowell. And many of our students have transportation as a challenge. So being in Lowell on campus is much easier for them to be able to transfer to Bedford. And it sounded like Bedford was going to be identified as a biology camp, a life science campus. So there are three of my initial Because I think it's a great proposal. I mean, I don't have anything about the proposal. I was just looking from the point of being an instructor in a classroom with my students. And that's it. I'll pass. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Let me tackle some of those. Number one, this conversation has been going on for, it feels like a very long time, and this planning process has gone on. We've had a couple of critical conversations along with this, and I will tell you that those previous presentations that are part of critical conversation are available for viewing because they were all recorded, as this one was, as you saw when you were coming on, so that people have access to it and they can have access to the slides afterwards. The second question that you had is, remind me of the second question, Sally.
Well,
Sorry.
my first question is who's paying for it? That's my first
Oh,
question.
well, first of all, this is a plan, okay? And like we did probably 15 years ago, we have a Sasaki plan. I want to tell you that not every element of what was in that plan 15 years ago was completed, right? That plan had a theater building down on the Bedford campus that never came to fruition, right? Because the Academic Arts Center presented itself as another option. And so therefore, these plans are really about working with people who have planning ability to look at the usage of our buildings, how we might be able to better consolidate. And so I would tell you that not everything that happened in the last plan was executed properly and done. And I would also tell you that it will be the same case with this plan. It is not Sasaki's responsibility technically to figure out how to pay for it. Their job is to lay out how we might be able to best utilize our buildings and some of the space that we currently own. And it is part of the conversation about what's happening at the state level in terms of opportunities for capital funding to be able to talk about a more full renovation of Henderson Hall and some other spaces as well. So again, this is not going to happen overnight, and it certainly isn't going to happen with all of the detail that's outlined in the plan. The plan is designed to give us some thoughts, exciting ideas, and directions. The other piece that you'll see in the plan that is part of every single one of the three options that we first looked at was this idea of some of the space that we have and how do we capitalize on using some of that space. We have buildable space on the campus in Bedford. How do we look at that as a source of revenue for the institution to do some of the other things that we need to do, besides what we can do for capital funding, besides what we can raise in working with donors and working through grants. The third piece of that is how do we use some of the parcels of developable land that would help support some of the renovations and changes that need to happen at the rest of the college. So I can assure you no one's going to be dropping a $317 million budget in our laps to be able to do this overnight. So that doesn't really work that way. But it does help with funding when you have a plan that's been articulated, where you've worked with master planners like the folks that work in Sasaki, and on top of the fact, when you can align this with decarbonization goals of the state. So as you can see, being early to the gate around how do we create more energy efficiency in each of these buildings might provide some real funding opportunities, both from the state and from others who want to see this kind of goal for sustainability really be part of the mix of what we do. And then Sally, I'm sorry, I might have missed the last one.
The second one was, are we anticipating students coming back to campus? And the third one was for students who have transportation challenges. If we move the life science to Bedford, our Lowell students, I'm just concerned about them getting to Bedford. That's all.
Yeah, the issue about students coming back to campus has to be something that we addressed. And in fact, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, we've already started to. When we saw that 70-30 split, my conversation with Arlene and the deans was that we needed to be able to build capacity for face-to-face. And there will always be face-to-face and technical learning experiences that are going to be invaluable on both of our campuses that are going to require students coming to campus. And we're already seeing an increase in the number of sections. If you look at an enrollment report that talks about where most of our credits are generated, most of those credits are generated from face-to-face instruction on campus to this day. So that opportunity, along with Mass Reconnect, the potential for free community college and all of those pieces is, yes, we will have to be prepared to welcome more students back on campus. Part of the focus here was if you looked at one of the original options, which was to close a campus and consolidate everything on one campus, which would be an incredible challenge for us to do. That is a challenge for the institution to meet. How do we attract more students to the Bedford campus? How do we focus the identity of the Bedford campus in a way that would attract students? And that means high demand areas, technical programs, face-to-face. So that's all part of why we're having this conversation. Our online courses, our hybrid courses, our asynchronous or synchronous elements have all, and HighFlex, have all been pretty consistent in terms of their numbers. What I would say you are seeing change is face-to-face. And we see that through the usage of the parking lots. We see that through the traffic that we're seeing in all of our buildings that have increased, specifically this semester. So kudos to everyone that helped to build a better academic schedule to create more balance, along with the fact that we have transportation that takes students back and forth. So the opportunity to really focus on certain programs is part of it. And Sally, I'm hoping I've answered almost all your questions. Was there a third?
Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Cool. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Phil. We do have a question in the chat. Arts and creative was emphasized in Bedford, but does that mean anything for the Academic Arts Center in Lowell?
No, I mean, the Academic Arts Center continues to exist. It actually has classrooms and has arts center, but this is the idea of how do we utilize sort of the beautiful facility for music and other possibilities in North Academic. I think what you will see that Sasaki was trying to do was cluster programs together so that each building has foci, right? That's the idea, and to make sure that we can identify that. And that means moving a lot of things around. And I think that that's pretty standard in a planning practice, because if anyone were to ask you why radiology is in North Academic, nobody could answer, other than that was the room and the space that was available at the time when we started the program. Doesn't necessarily make sense that that's where it should be. It just means that that's the space that was given when we started the program. Middlesex has a long and distinguished history of finding space for new programs. May not have necessarily been in buildings where there are other programs where those could coexist or create synergy, right? I mean, currently we have CAD in one building, we have engineering in that same building, we have some robotics work that's happening in our physical plant building with some additional training, and we've got, other things that are possibilities. Part of this is about bringing some of those together in a way that we have never planned for in the history of the institution. So I think that the Sasaki Fuke has really tried to pull together programs that are like-minded and create a focus for some of the spaces, and what could we do to meet more high demand programs, specifically in the Bedford campus, to attract additional students. So I think that's probably the shortest answer to that. But what exists in the Academic Arts Center, what exists in Lowell, what exists in many places, is there is no intention to shut down arts or anything on one campus and move it to another campus. In fact, if you look at what happens, a significant number of music courses, a significant number of art classes happen on both of our campuses currently, and that would continue. Where that gets focused in terms of what's happening is really about trying to bring similar programs together to create other kinds of synergy.
Thank you, Phil. Jill, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for this presentation and for walking us through it and sharing your plans. I have two questions. I'll ask them one at a time. The first one is about the students. I'm wondering if there is a point in this planning process where students either have been already or will be able to weigh in with their preferences, particularly with the implications of grouping programs together. The reality may turn out to be that students who basically did their degree on one campus, or mainly one campus, the reality may be that they are now a two-campus student, and other aspects of the program. I just wondered whether students have a chance to weigh in at any point.
Yeah, thank you for asking those questions in order, Jill. And I appreciate having one at a time. Certainly, when we have a final draft of the master plan, we will reach out to our elected students that will be part of student government, our student trustee, and have some open sessions with students as well. What I would tell you is the future of the institution is something that we're going to have to take some control over, and we are going to, this idea that we will be all things to all students is part of our challenge. And so we are going to have to create some focus to be more efficient about our use of space. And that's one of the driving forces behind the master plan, with the idea that we want to make sure that we can hang on to both of our campuses and make them as fully functioning as we possibly can. And that's part of it. And I think certainly students will understand that there is still and will continue to be transportation between both of our campuses for the foreseeable future so that students can access programs and courses. So yeah, I suppose we could keep everything scattered around in the way that it was built up over time. That's not necessarily the most efficient use of space, and it's already proving by our space usage that it's not the most efficient use of space. And so therefore, we are going to have to take some control of the schedule and some control of where our academic programs are, especially if we want the Bedford campus to thrive. What you saw on the Sasaki slides is that 70% of our students are currently actively engaged in face-to-face classes in Lowell, and about 30 are in Bedford. That's a result of what happened coming back post-COVID. We have to be able to execute a plan that allows us to keep both campuses and to keep them fully engaged with our students. And so student voice will be important, but we're going to be clear with students about the fact that we are here for energy efficiency, and we are also here for figuring out how can we make the most efficient use of space so that we don't lose any of that space to serve our students.
Thank you. And my second question was, I wonder if you can go back to or elaborate on the slide that was about Bedford parking. I think I might have read it wrong. In terms of the existing number of spaces and the proposed number of spaces, it looked like it was quite a lot less, but I think I missed something.
Well, there's a lot of parking in Bedford, as we all know. Are you talking about the long-term land use slide? I think we can go back to, is it possible, Marianne, for us to go back to that slide? I think it's after activate the quad that I think, and there are two slides there. One is long-term land use, and then the one after that, Jill, is it the one after that's called proposed parking count?
The one that had the number of parking spaces.
Yeah, it's the next one, Marianne.
That's it on the screen there.
Existing is 1,000 and proposed is 500 and something. And the rest in the VA.
Right. So I think that what we would be doing I think this was a very high level kind of takeoff of understanding what the implications are. And as we think about the utilization of your parking and what the demand would be relative to the plan and how it's built out, it's how do you accommodate the appropriate amount of parking spaces that can be utilized if land should change or uses should change. But yes, I think what you're seeing here is if you take away that parking, you're reducing, existing parking, we would put proposed parking, there would be overflow parking, but what you're not seeing here is like the net parking of what that requires as far as the total. If you add some and remove some, what's the net? What should that be? That would be part of our future kind of studies.
And Jill, one very, very important update to this graph, and understand that this is work that has been collected from a couple of years worth of data. That this has already changed just within the last 3 weeks. That brown space that you see potential for alternate use parking lot G, for more than 3 years, that parking lot has been 100% empty throughout COVID. However, the great news is, going back to what Sally was referring to, though, is that we are seeing increased numbers on the Bedford campus again for the face-to-face. So I am thrilled to report that for the first time since at least 2019, GLOT is back in play, because we have dozens of cars that are up there now every day because D-Lot and A-Lot are being used. And I can also I think most of you will understand my next statement. I've received a complaint as recently as today that students are parking in the faculty spot over at B lot. So we have to get back on that. It's a problem that we haven't had to contend with for such a number of years because of the volume there. But the fact that we've got so many cars up in G lot now is a great sign, and it might be an indicator of what of the wave, the direction we're heading with this. What it's also required us to do, though, and we've adapted to it, is that throughout, well, since 2020, since before 2020, we did away with the circulator shuttle on campus because everybody was able to fit into the parking lots that could walk to the buildings. No longer the case. We've got to get that circulator back into play now to get the students out of G lot, which we really, I mean, it's a problem, but it's a fabulous problem that we've got to deal with. So we're hoping that's a real good sign of things to come. And I know that I can tell you, because we meet every Monday with DCAM and Sasaki, and we spent 15 minutes yesterday talking about just the current utilization of G lot, that where what once might have been in play for developable alternate use is now currently being used again by students, which is where the VA lot comes into the conversation, because as everybody knows, that's a tad further down the road there off of Springs Road.
Yeah, and I would also add to what Patrick has noted, Jill, is the issue that this is an ever-evolving plan, and part of what we really wanted to do is get a fix on the developable parcels of land that exist on the Bedford campus, because the Bedford campus is significant wetlands. And so part of that is there's a space sort of at the beginning on the Bill Ricca line that's available. And also, whenever you talk about potential partnerships in developable land, what makes that particular brown spot that you see there attractive, which is where Lot G is the fact that that's easy access to the road and back out to the community. So depending on what that partnership might be, whether it be senior housing, whether it be affordable housing, whether it's a part of a company that comes in and is part of developing that land, it may mean that we have to move some of our parking lots. So we may have to reconsider where Lot G is, or we may have to say that the VA lot is a really potential for any buildable land spot that still belongs to the college. So I would say that this has been changing, and it's going to change rapidly between now and when we finish in October and November as we continue these conversations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Great, thank you. We do have a comment and a question in the chat. The first comment that we have comes from our registrar. This is an incredible plan. I love the ingenuity and focus on sustainability. There are great changes on the horizon. Next, we have a question. Will this plan accommodate the quiet room or mediation room, lactation room, the multi-purpose room was in Bedford House?
Most everything that will be in Bedford House that is to serve students will have to be reconsidered as we move spaces around on the Bedford campus. We know the importance of being able to provide those spaces for health and wellness for students. We know it's important for us to be able to be responsive to those who come to campus who are mothers. We know that we have a number of considerations. So anything that is an existing building, that whether it be Bedford House or Trustees House or South Academic, all have to be considered in where they will fit in the quad and the redesign of the campus. I mean, I think I've told many people many times, don't get too comfortable about where you're sitting. We're about to do a master plan. Now, it may get to be 2 years before you have to move out of whatever space you're sitting in. So it will impact all of you at different times. But absolutely, the services that we continue to provide with students, we will continue to provide on both campuses, wherever we are in this master plan.
Thank you, Phil. Jonathan, you have your hand raised.
Hi, everyone. Jonathan Crockett, Coordinator of Essential Needs and Community Resources. I'm so excited to see this plan. It just feels very energizing and hopeful and just exciting. So I appreciate how much thought and time and effort has gone into this, and also the way it's being shared publicly with all of us to better understand it and comment on. So thank you for that. In particular, and this goes to the comments that you just made, Phil, I'm thrilled that as part of the 7 campus planning principles that develop a healthy campus is part of that. I think it's, maybe lower hanging fruit to talk about utilization of space and efficiencies and environmental impact and sustainability, but this piece about healthy campus and all that fits under that umbrella is tremendously important, obviously, and I'm just so glad that that's part of this structure and part of the plan. So thank you for including that. And I wanted to just go back to the conversation about solar. I know a lot of time and thought has been put into this, and I'm not offering something that probably hasn't been talked about already, but seeing parking lots that have solar, sort of solar structures built over the lot that allows both some shade and precipitation cover for vehicles, but at the same time collecting solar seems like a really good double use of parking lots. So I assume that's been part of the conversations. I hear Patrick talking about the building, the rooftops not structurally being able to support that, but with the parking lot space we have, that does seem like a great solar spot. So somewhat of a question, more of a comment, but just wanted to get that in there.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. If parking lot solar would be more feasible in this case than rooftop solar.
Jonathan, we're also looking at one of the side conversations is just with the meadows and or the space even in the back of the community garden and even on the entryway from the north entrance of Bedford as well, just with existing planes that are currently not developed, even heading into the fitness trail that you created a few years back out in back of Trustee's house. So that those green spaces that are within our footprint there are also being looked at as well.
You're talking about the dirt parking lot that was supposed to be the theater and then was supposed to be the biotech building. Yeah, that space, yes, is always possible. Yeah, and this is what I mean, folks. Like what you see here is exciting and energizing. And Jonathan, thank you for that comment. At the same time, do not believe that everything that you see will come to fruition. There isn't enough money, time, or energy to make all of it happen, but it does give us an opportunity to rethink how we are going to use space. And so you will see some, and in fact, quite frankly, we are already beginning to see some of that. We already have the beginnings of an expansion of our life sciences program that's going to happen in Henderson Hall. We've been raising money for that to happen, waiting for an approval from DCAN on the roof because there'll be 2 new labs in Henderson Hall within the next 12 to 18 months. And then the idea is how do we begin to move some of our programs that really should belong together. And expensive robotics equipment, as I said, that's potentially down in a facilities building. How do we get that into a real classroom and rethink some of this? So I think it's really exciting to see it, but I don't want everyone to look at these beautiful pictures and ideas and think that all of it will come to fruition overnight. There will be some things that we can do that are low-hanging fruit, and there are some things that are going to take years of planning in order to execute if we even go there.
And just to show you how rapidly these things change and the news and information evolves, Lisa, take a note. DCAM just emailed as Phil was speaking. November 14th, they're going to do the DCAR presentation to the Sustainability Committee. So I'll get you the facts on that. And if you could take care of sharing it with whomever you want to include on that part of the conversation. So 2 p.m. on November 14th, lock it in.
Thank you. I have a question in the chat from Ellen Ricca. Will the idea of open concept office space take into consideration the need for data security and confidentiality? What is on someone's computer or paperwork on a desk or file space?
Well, it's a great question, Ellen. I think, first of all, we have to educate people about the fact that that's their individual responsibility in their jobs as is, because we have folks that aren't necessarily doing that currently in the spaces they exist, because they think when they can leave their computer on when they leave their office and leave the door open. So, I mean, I'm just mentioning that we're not so smart about this already, and we would have to be smarter in a hoteling space and in a space that's open. But I think that there is an understanding that different job functions will be working with different kinds of student information that needs to be kept confidential. And so as we continue to go down this road of having conversations about what our office spaces look like and what shared spaces look like, we have to be cognizant of that. But I would remind people that, we are all ultimately every day a cybersecurity risk to this institution. So the safety. So when I leave my office every single time, I shut my computer down and then I load it back up when I come back because I don't know whether I've left the door open or so. I think people need to be very cognizant of the fact that we individually have to take responsibility for protecting information. And I'm just laying that out there because I think that problem is bigger than the idea of ever getting to a point of hoteling in shared space yet. But of course, we would have to develop a series and a set of protocol that would help us maintain the kind of security that we need around sensitive files that all of us are responsible for. Many of us are responsible for every day. So thank you for that question.
We did get a message. It came directly to me from Lisa Lobel. Please, not the meadow in regards to solar panels. So I wanted to make sure that I got that out there. We also have a question from Binur. Will most faculty offices be moved to Cowan? If so, will they be cubicles?
No. Well, first of all, most of the faculty that have been in Cowan for years have been living in cubicles, and there's lots of discussions about what we could do on the 4th and 5th floor to potentially accommodate that in the future. So you'll see part of the dream around Cowan does not mean that every faculty office is going to be moved over to Cowan. We still have faculty offices that are in all of our other buildings. It may mean that we have to be a little more clever about how we use that space, and it may in some cases be shared space, et cetera. But for the most part, it's not like we're going to move faculty out of every other building and put them all in Cowan. I mean, if you look at the designs for Bedford, there's a reference to faculty space in many of the other buildings. It may not be highlighted as the largest piece of it, but certainly our goal in a lot of the redesign, as it is to bring programs together that would create synergy, is to have faculty offices near where they're teaching in their labs, et cetera. So, I mean, there are many people who now have offices that are in one building and most of their classes are in another building. I mean, and that goes back to the fact that we were not a very planful campus in terms of the way we've done this. And it really gives us an opportunity this time around to be more planful. So if Binur, somewhere in this, if you've misconstrued that we're moving everybody to one building, that is not accurate.
Thank you, Phil. I also have a parking question for Lowell. Parking spaces in Lowell, Talbot, Derby area. Is there any future plan for it?
So there's, I mean, the answer
more
is
like knocking another building down in the city and turning it into a parking lot. I'm not sure I understand the question.
yeah, we're kind of handcuffed into the infrastructure of what the downtown provides. So no, we're using Roy Garage on Market Street and the Downs Garage over on John Street, a block away. There is no availability for parking on that downtown street. The only thing that has changed, much to the consternation of our allied health folks, is that the city has decided to start using Derby Park for activities again, including busking and concerts at night, which they're trying to get some life back into that abandoned space. But we're trying to work with them to come up with a plan that works for us as well. But we don't have any extra any access to any extra parking on that corridor other than what's currently in use.
Thank you, Pat. I do not have any more questions or comments in the chat. So again, you can just type it in, or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself.
Well, Beth, this gives me a good opportunity to jump in while people have questions. I'll create more things that are happening, and then you may have more questions about that. So, because these are rumors you may have heard. So let me see if I can bring some of those rumors to a close. So as you'll see in this plan, the Pollard building is sort of highlighted in this plan, and not necessarily appropriately so, simply because for two things. Number one, that is not our building. It belongs to the Middlesex and Lowell Academy Charter School. And we are moving out of that building because we have space everywhere else. And we're trying to accommodate everything that's in that building and move it to another location. And we are doing that incrementally and over time because the idea is we're going to pay out the end of that lease. We lease space in there, but those of you may have noticed the enrollment center has been moved back over to the Cowan building, that we have rescheduled classes to a new place. We are moving some of the folks that have offices there and bringing them into other buildings, even if it's temporarily. So it is our intent to be moving completely out of Pollard over the course of this fall semester, and that we're actively engaged in doing that. At the same time, the charter school is working very prominently to work with several nonprofits in the area to move into the building. And I would even include some opportunity to talk with the Lowell Police Academy that could be stationed on Middle Street. So there's a lot that's happening. But what I would tell you is it is our goal to be out of the Pollard building and leasing space and using our own space. And that's part of the, I would say, intermediary steps to get us to the point of more efficiently using our space. And while that means for several people who have been in Pollard or been in other buildings that they may be moving twice in a short period of time, I want to thank you for your flexibility. We're trying to do everything we can to, in the process of working on several other projects, identify an appropriate space for everyone that's in Pollard. And I want to thank the provost and the deans and Pat and physical plans and security for doing everything they can to make that happen. So thank you. So that is our plan with Pollard, because it's not our building, right? So it can't be part of a long-term solution for the institution. And I also want to mention, before we go any further, I do want to, we've kept our partners, Sasaki and our DCAM partners on there. They're welcome to stay as long as they like, but they may have other business. So if anyone doesn't have at this time, because you're going to get a chance to potentially hear from Sasaki again in the future. Does anybody have any other questions? Marianne and Serena and Sadeshna, thank you so much for your time today. And we really appreciate this as a first step in being more open and candid with our community about some of the ideas and plans, and really appreciate your time. So anybody else have any final questions for Sasaki before we let them go to their other work, whatever that may be? Because it's only Middlesex. That's all that they should really care about, even though we're an international master planning firm. So great. So Marianne and Sadeshna and Serena, thank you so much for your presentation today. And thank you for your time. I'm going to go on to the second rumor, I guess, is to address the fact that some of these plans around executing and expanding the work that we're doing with Mass Life Sciences. It was as early as last week, a conversation with the CEO and executive director of Mass Life Sciences. As you know, getting buildings and getting renovation just through one avenue, which is capital spending, is not going to happen right away. And in fact, this year with the new administration, they've put all capital funds on hold. So in other words, we can't apply for a renovation to Henderson Hall, even with all this wonderful master planning, simply because there is no availability for that process to happen as we switch into a new administration. So perhaps the next year, and we'll get some more updates and we'll fill you in on that. But there are other avenues to be able to do the kind of work that we want to do on the Bedford campus and in Lowell. I had a great conversation with Ken Turner, who's the CEO of Mass Life Sciences, who's very excited about a number of things. One, the extraordinary work that we do in biotech in Lowell. By the way, that renovation in Lowell was supposed to be a building in Bedford that never transpired, but that's a whole other story. The $3 million ask then went into that facility in Lowell when we renovated that building there and those beautiful facilities that we now have for our biotech program. And the idea is we are about to imagine a new wing of Henderson Hall on the second floor, because it's ground first and second. I keep calling it the third floor. I don't know what we get to this ground thing. It's confusing, but it's in an area, and we've created new space for adjunct faculty for now, and really have worked on developing how do we then fund that. And we've had great success at finding Mass Life Sciences money, capital skills money, private donors, and some of our own money from the college to be able to renovate that next level of what we're going to do with some life sciences labs, let's call it that. The Ken Turner got to tour that and got very excited about the possibility, and he got to see some of the work with the master plan. He also is very aware, as many of you may not, is that we've actually borrowed, well, I don't know, I guess we've borrowed, yes. We have robotics equipment that's down in our facilities building. We had to find a classroom very quickly to really do some immediate training for a company called Insulet that does remarkable work for people who are diabetic and insulin issues, and they create these pods that are just phenomenal. You have to go and see this, where people do not have to inject themselves every day. The pod lasts for 3 days. The injections are automatic. It's just, I've never seen anything quite like it, and all of it's completely automated. We are doing the training for that company, for their technicians, to be able to work with robotics. So we're very excited about the expansion of robotics. This is Mount Wachusett equipment that when they closed the Devon's campus, they looked for a home for it. We raised our hand and said, please bring your equipment here. It is now in our facility building, and we've been really expanding and responding to Insulet. And I thank our corporate and community eds and the folks that work in non-credit who have done remarkable work around this training. Well, that visit from Ken Turner was all about, okay, how can you do more of this training? And how can we rely on Middlesex? And they have already committed to, when we return the equipment to Mount Wachusett, that they will indeed pay for all the new robotics equipment that we need to do that training. So we've already got some commitment from Mass Life Sciences and they're very excited about some renovations to Henderson Hall. And they're very excited about making the Bedford campus part of a hub for the Mass Life Sciences in this area. So we are going to actively pursue every form of funding that we possibly can to really help with the renovations that have to happen on the Bedford campus. The last thing that you might have heard a rumor about, or you've been reading in the papers, is the fact that over the course of a process, I want to say, it feels like 6 months, but it's only been about 6 weeks. That's how fast this has happened. The state of emergency around migrant workers and the opportunity for different communities to identify space that might be possible to respond to the emerging migrant crisis in this state. And I will tell you that Lowell has been a city that has welcomed migrants for years, that they have enriched our community, they enrich our community here on campus, and they are ready to work and get involved in the American dream. They have no work permits. That's a problem that the governor has to work on. But one of the identified spaces, and we're not exactly sure how this happened, was the UMass Lowell Inn and Conference Center. And so you might have read the fact that in advance of that, UMass Chancellor Julie Chen, in a conversation with me in August, told me that she was going to be shutting down the UMass Lowell Inn and Conference Center, prepare for the state to use that facility. Fast forward over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of conversation and reaction to the use of the Inn and Conference Center for that particular purpose. I would say that it is not altogether anti-migrant families. It is also a very legitimate concern that is the only hotel that's downtown. It's used for a number of functions. We use it ourselves. It's where our NETCHI team would stay, and we would have functions over at the ICC and the conference center. And if you've never been in, we've recently had an opportunity to tour that building last Friday, thanks to Senator Kennedy and our delegation. But what I found when UMass Lowell pulled out of that building is that there were a lot of people in the city that were very interested in knowing whether Middlesex could play a role in the solution, long-term solution for the ICC. So if there are migrant families that go in there for a certain period of time, what would happen to that facility long-term? And I have said, well, of course, we're working on pathways. We're doing everything we can to provide learn and earn and valuable experience to all of our students, including our business and our hospitality and culinary students. In fact, if you come to Lowell, you'll see there's a brand new culinary kitchen, thanks to an earmark and some funding from Senator Kennedy. And we're excited about even doing more of that. And so we are going to be part of the solution in terms of how this plays out. It may continually be the fact that we could explore not only taking over the operation with the assistance of Aramark, which is the food service that's currently there, providing opportunities for our students in culinary and hospitality and just some beautiful facilities there, but also the opportunity to be able to continue to run the conference center and have access to that. And on top of that, to be able to continue to have residence halls. We'll be the first community college in the state to have residence halls. Now, we have a number of students that have already been in the UMass Lowell Inn Conference Center in their residence halls for the last, I want to say 4 or 5 years through the Reserve Placement Program. You might have read that through some of my comments. all of those students that were planning to come to Middlesex full-time this fall and also live in the residence halls and then return to UMass when there was a seat available in their program, reserve placement program, they all had to be moved to other residence halls. So we have students that are taking courses here at Middlesex full-time, and they are living in other places at the UMass campus because everyone was moved. So we already have, been using a number of rooms there. We have an expanding and a possibility for international education because of our institute, Intensive English Institute, that has been very successful and could be part of an international recruiting opportunity. One of our challenges with our international students is the fact that we do not have a place for them to live. On top of that, we have a number of academic programs that could attract people from around the state and around the country, including our exceptional sort of arts programs, our science programs, and there are a lot of students that may be very interested in having a residence hall experience. And so we've talked a lot about partnership, where the UMass Lowell would continue to keep a number of floors, that we'd be able to work on this in partnership while we're talking about what happens with migrant workers, et cetera, and whether that facility is used for that purpose. So all of this is being explored. I'm never going to back down from an exploration. We will, and I'm very clear about this, not be taking on any additional debt that is the university's debt for owning that building. So if somebody wants to sell us the building for the right price, which the last couple of times here has been $1, I think we bought the Academic Arts Center, we purchased for $1. So if somebody wants to come to us with a deal, and then somebody wants to help us renovate the building and provide state bond funding, or even our local banks want to assist us in doing that, then we're going to keep our ears and our eyes open for every possibility that we can do anything we can to better serve our students. So more to come on that. Keep reading the newspaper. We'll try and keep you informed. We are far from any possible solution. We are far from any deal cut on this. I can assure you, we are just in the initial stages of an exploration. And that's what it is at this point. So if you have any questions about anything about what I've just said, please ask me, because we have some time here. It's only 3:38, so you may have, the idea. No, everyone, I've just brought them to silence through. I'm just going to remind you folks that part of our solution going forward is increasing enrollment and bringing us back to the vitality that once was for both of our campuses. If you have not seen through these presentations that is in jeopardy, then you have missed a point. We need our best thinking. We need all of us rowing in the same direction, and we need to be bold, and we need to be decisive, and we need to figure out how we can best serve our students and that we can grow as an institution, because we have the capacity to do that. And if we're going to have a vibrant future, both on our Bedford campus and in Lowell, then we need to be as creative and forward-thinking as we possibly can. And so I'm very grateful for all of you about going on this journey, this master planning journey, and an exploration of everything that we can do that can really expand the college and its service to students. So thank you for taking the time. Stacy, you have your hand up first.
Hello, thank you. It's definitely the business professor in me, but I'm very curious. Have you actually done some financial projections and put together a business plan for what could potentially be happening at the ICC?
Yeah, well, Stacy, the first time somebody whispered to me about this was Julie Chen back on August 17th. So there's not been a lot of time to do that, but the answer is absolutely. We would not move forward with anything without a feasibility study. We've already gotten significant data from community partners around hotel residency. We're doing a lot of research about residence halls. There's a lot of research and a lot of backing going on. And of course, we would not move forward without a feasibility plan, without a business plan, without communicating with all of you about it. And on top of that, without making sure that there was some promise of funding to be able to do all of that. I'm cheap. I'm not going to spend a lot of money on developing something unless we know that there's real money behind whatever everyone wants to happen for the ICC. So you are right on target on what our next steps are. I think it would be exciting for us to engage in some of that conversation with our own business department, because I believe the learn and earn for the future for our business students could be right next door. Suzanne.
Suzanne.
You have to unmute yourself. I forget all the time too.
I think I do enough Zoom teaching that I know that. I have a question I'm just going to throw out here. It's kind of not related, but we're talking about expanding and students coming from all areas to our college. With the accelerated program, I'm have students coming from Boston hospitals. I also have a daytime student who is commuting from Medford. She takes the T into Boston, and then the commuter rail to Lowell. My question is, does anybody
That's the draw of your program, Suzanne. That's a successful program. When they're coming from all over to take your program,
skipping Boston.
Yeah.
But here's my thing. I mean, and somebody may know the answer to this. I just don't. Is there any way that the state offers not a free voucher, but a discount? Because the students in the accelerated program are paying $20 every time they come to Lowell back and forth from Boston for the program, and that's a lot of money. And so I didn't know, does Massachusetts have anything? Do we ask Jim Campanini? Do we find out? There's got to be something we can do, because I can't imagine we're the only. And I'm just looking at my little program. If we're really reaching out, it might be something that we look at. And then I have these students that I don't want them to know how bad walking through the certain park areas are, from the train station to Middle Street, but I'm scared for them. I mean, they're walking, from Thorndike over to Middle Street and back to take the train back into Boston. So, I mean, it's just a question.
Yeah. Well, I think the piece is, let's tackle I live in that area, Suzanne. I walk in that area every night and every day. Right. So I get it. And I think that you're going to find that in any urban community. If anyone thinks that there's any particular street in Lowell that's less safe than others in terms of the streets that we are currently on, then I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think part of what we're challenged with is what's happening in a lot of urban environments. The second piece that I would say to you is, and everything you've suggested from Trustee Campanini on down, is there is a lot of discussion about public transportation and opportunities for what we could do for our students. So I think we should explore that. And I think, Jonathan has to deal with that. We have to figure out, how do we deal with financial aid packages that may better support students for transportation issues. But I think that in terms of looking for discounts, it's done within the city of Boston, how much there's a willingness to do it outside of it with the T. And I don't even need to go into the whole 20-minute discussion of where we are with public transportation in the state of Massachusetts. It's a huge problem that we are not going to solve overnight. But I'm going to encourage you to, we'll work back with our trustee company, but I'm going to encourage you to work with and talk to Jonathan, and also to see whether or not that particular student is, in essence, eligible for financial aid, and whether there's something else we can do based on some of the transportation challenges they have. So
Phil, in the chat, some of our community have given information on the student pass plan for college students with links to the MBTA program. So
yeah, Suzanne, I'm assuming that student's already accessing that plan for the MBTA, but we don't know.
No, they're not.
Okay.
And actually, that student has to be 25 and older too, and falls under I don't know what those monies. I don't even know about financial aid pieces. But I'm definitely going to investigate this and see if there's something that they can, a resource they can reach out to. Thank you so much.
And let us know what you learn if you do, please.
I certainly will.
Thank you. Jackie, you're back.
I'm back. Yeah, I'm just brainstorming. With the ICC, that's really interesting. And I had been hearing in the news about how some of the locations where they have hotels and such with migrants in them, one of the issues is that they don't have the support services for them. So I'm wondering, could we have internships for our human services students, or something else, not just business oriented, but some of the other resources that we provide and or opportunities for our students to get involved with this population to help.
Absolutely. And I think that, we've said from the very beginning, whether it's Lowell or Bedford, because Bedford is also a town that's been dealing with this. I mean, Karen Townsend and the dental hygiene faculty will tell you they spent a few hours trying to figure out how they could best support some of the migrant families and the kids that are there to be able to get them dental services. And they did an amazing job of creating sort of a plan, how we may be able to bring families back and forth. So, I mean, this is what we will continue to do, is to see how we can best serve any of these families in any location, but those specifically in Lowell and Bedford that are most direct service areas. So yeah, I think it's a wait and see for us to have a better understanding of whether or not the state actually plans to use the ICC. There's some question about whether that is the case, but for now, we don't have enough information to know exactly what we would do. I would say that Bedford's done a really remarkable job of bringing a lot of nonprofits and a lot of folks together to solve some of their concerns about those wraparound services. Unfortunately, because we don't have enough information about really what's going to happen in Lowell and when it's going to start, we do have a number of nonprofits that are already beginning to work together, not in any coordinated fashion, but I was just with someone on Saturday. We were talking about opportunities for training, which will certainly be something that we want to do because they'll be right next door. We do a number of certificates and opportunities for CNA and other pieces of which, some of which we're doing. And we are hearing, and of course it depends on the rumor that you hear, we're hearing that the families that are coming to Lowell could potentially be from Haiti. And again, that's just the initial rumor that we're hearing. I have no idea whether there's any, there's not a lot of clear communication around this from the state, and which only confuse some of the communication that's happening in the city as well. So as we learn more, we'll share more, but I wanted to make sure that early enough on you received a communication from me when that happened to the ICC, because it was impacting our own students. And so that's where some of our conversations started, obviously, is when we first knew that that was going to be the case at the ICC. And the ICC tomorrow night, is it tomorrow night? Yeah, Wednesday, has its last final event, Project Learn. I'm on a panel for them there, but yeah, it's the last official event in the ICC, and then it's going to be a closed building. So hopefully there'll be a long-term solution to this, and we'll get a better sense of if and when Lowell is going to support migrant families in that building, when that will be happening. Too many unknowns. I'm cognizant of the fact that it's 3:49, and so many of you have stayed to be part of this conversation. I'm very grateful. If you have any individual questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. So a couple of you have mentioned our efforts here have been to be as transparent about this process as we possibly can. If you're in this mix somewhere in Bedford and Lowell and you've seen this as part of the plan, you don't have to pack your bags or pack up your office tomorrow. There is nothing that's going to happen overnight, although there will be some things that will be occurring. Certainly we'll be in communication with you about that. But I hope that you'll go back and look at the recording and look at the presentation again and get a sense of sort of some of the excitement about what could happen as we build and reinvigorate both of our campuses, and at the same time become a responsible citizen in terms of sustainability and decarbonization. Really important for us to consider, especially an institution of our side and all the people that we serve. So thank you for everything that you do every day, and thank you for being part of this critical conversation. We'll look forward to seeing you next month. And again, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. We'll be happy to respond as much as we possibly can.